The morning she asked if there was room in my bed, the sun had barely climbed over the rooftops, and the world still smelled like wet pavement and second chances. I remember the moment with painful clarity, the trembling in her voice, the exhaustion in her eyes, and the strange feeling that something important was about to change in my life forever. When I told her yes, there was room. I didn't realize that the real question wasn't about space in my tiny apartment. It was about whether there was room in my life for someone who had nowhere else to go. Before we begin this story, take a moment to pause. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of helping someone when they need it most, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Journal. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need them the most. Red Heart. My name is Arman Valles, and most mornings of my life used to look the same. I woke up early in my cramped studio apartment above a bakery that filled the hallway with the smell of warm bread. I worked as a bicycle courier in the city, weaving through traffic while most people were still drinking their first coffee. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was steady, and after years of chaos growing up, steady was enough. That particular morning, sunlight poured through my thin curtains in soft golden strips. The city outside was slowly waking up, delivery trucks rumbling, distant horns echoing between buildings, pigeons fluttering across the fire escapes. I was tying my shoes when I heard a hesitant knock at my door. At first, I thought it was the landlord asking for rent again 2 days early like he always did. But when I opened the door, I saw a young woman standing there, her shoulders wrapped in a thin gray hoodie, her hair messy from what looked like a long night outdoors. Her name, I would soon learn, was Sera Halden, though at that moment she looked more like someone the world had quietly forgotten. She wasn't crying. That was the part that stayed with me. People who cry still expect comfort. She just looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. She explained in broken pieces that she had been staying with a friend down the street, but the friend had moved away suddenly. She had spent the night wandering around the neighborhood, trying to figure out what to do next. She had noticed the light under my door early that morning and gathered the courage to knock. Then she asked the question. Was there room in my bed? Not in a hopeful way. Not in a manipulative way. Just in the quiet, desperate tone of someone who had run out of options. I remember standing there, the smell of bread drifting up from the bakery downstairs, sunlight filling the hallway behind her, and thinking about all the times in my life when I had wished someone would open a door for me. So I said yes. But something inside me made me add another question, one that surprised even me. Yes, there's room, but do you want to stay with me forever? It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even logical. It was just a strange, instinctive reaction from someone who had spent most of his life believing that people needed someone to stay. Sera blinked like she didn't know how to process the sentence. Then she gave the smallest, most fragile smile I had ever seen. That was the beginning. At first, the arrangement was simple. She slept on the bed while I used an old mattress on the floor. During the day, she helped downstairs at the bakery, washing trays and sweeping floors in exchange for breakfast. I kept working as a courier, pedaling across the city with the strange new feeling that someone might actually be waiting when I got home. Day by day, the apartment changed. The silence softened. Sera opened the windows every morning to let the daylight in. She placed a tiny plant on the windowsill she bought for $2 from a street vendor. She started humming while cleaning, quiet melodies that filled the small space like sunlight. But life rarely changes without resistance. Some neighbors began whispering. The landlord complained that 2 people were living in a space meant for one. And sometimes Sera would disappear into long stretches of silence, staring out the window like she was watching ghosts from her past. One afternoon, weeks later, she finally told me why. She had grown up bouncing between relatives, shelters, and strangers' couches. Every place had an invisible timer. Every kindness came with an expiration date. Somewhere along the way, she stopped believing that staying was real. Listening to her that day felt like holding a fragile glass memory. I realized that when she asked if there was room in my bed, what she had really been asking was something much deeper. Was there room for her existence in someone else's life? So we kept going. Slowly. Carefully. One morning at a time. Sera eventually found work at the bakery full-time. The owner, an older woman named Mirela Donati, saw something determined in her and gave her a chance. The smell of bread became part of both our lives. We would wake early together, watching sunlight spill across the city while the first loaves baked downstairs. Months passed. The whispers from neighbors faded. The landlord stopped complaining once the rent was always paid on time. The tiny plant on the windowsill grew taller, its leaves reaching toward the daylight like it knew it belonged there. And one bright morning almost a year later, Sera asked me something again. Not with desperation this time. With quiet certainty. She asked if I remembered the day she knocked on my door. Of course I did. Then she told me something that made my chest feel impossibly full. She said it was the first morning in her life that the sun felt warm instead of lonely. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment to like the video and share it with someone who believes small acts of kindness can change a life. Stories like these travel farther when people pass them along. Sunrise. Because sometimes the biggest turning points in life don't happen in grand moments. They happen in quiet hallways, with sunlight on the floor, and a door that someone chooses to open. Today, years later, Sera and I still live in that same neighborhood, though not in that tiny studio anymore. The bakery downstairs eventually became ours when Mirela retired. Every morning the smell of bread still rises through the building like a promise that a new day has begun. And sometimes, when the first customers arrive, I see someone standing outside the door looking unsure, the same way Sera once did. Whenever that happens, I always remember one simple truth. Kindness doesn't need a grand plan. It just needs space. And sometimes, that space begins with something as small as a bed, a question, and the courage to say yes. Before we reach the end, I have a small request for you. Special request. Comment the word kindness below if you believe one act of compassion can change someone's entire life. Because somewhere out there, someone might be standing in a hallway right now, wondering if there's room for them in this world. And if this story moved you even a little, please like, comment, and share it so more people can be reminded that sometimes the simplest kindness can become someone's forever home. Red Heart.